Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Drive Pink Dialogue. Let me be the first, and I get there before Saur, to wish you all a happy Mother's Day. Inter Miami coming off a 4-1 defeat last night, or yesterday afternoon, rather, to the Minnesota United team of destiny, apparently. Saur, I'm going to stop right now because this has been a terrible intro, and I'm just going to let you talk. How are you feeling?
Feels like we're now in this little rut where we just get used to Inter Miami losing. Football is a cruel sport, and I am not ready for Inter Miami to be a terrible team again. We need to do something about it, and I hope we can fix it soon because this is not fun. I enjoy it more when Inter Miami wins, and when Inter Miami wins big. That's the reality, though, so we have to just deal with it, and hopefully for the next hour, 15 minutes, this can be a bit of a therapy for us to understand why Inter Miami is in the place that we are, even though we've, I think, said everything that there is to be said.
Yeah, so here's the plan. You're going to talk about what happened in the game, and then I'm going to go on random diatribes about everything that's going wrong with the club and with the team atmosphere and the personnel decisions and the tactics. And so we'll play a little good cop, bad cop. You can bring up all the positives, and then I'll be, Sally Sunshine over here. Where do we want to start?
I'm just going to say from the start, things are so bad that even I don't have any positives for this game. So might as well put that aside, and you and I can both have a nice depressing talk about why we're so shit. Excuse my language.
Yeah, no, I think we have to go back to sort of the starting monologue to our instant reaction. For anyone that didn't hear it yesterday, it's a question of, does Inter Miami want to be a special MLS team? And by that I mean like great borderlining like generational, or do they just want to be a good team? Because I think if your expectations are Inter Miami should be a good team, then it's not unreasonable to go on the road and lose to a good Western Conference opponent. And so as we sort of grapple with and wrestle with this fundamental question of what Inter Miami should be and what they should try and want to be, we're going to continue having these games that are going to continue producing results X, Y, and Z. And sometimes you'll get a 4-1 victory, and that'll be a lot of fun. And that's exactly what good MLS teams do. But also you're going to get losses on the road, like last night, where you lose 4-1, and that's also what good MLS teams do. This Inter Miami team, I think we've always thought it had the potential to be, and at times really did look like that special generational type team. And those types of teams don't go on the road and get blown out. They don't give up when they give up a third goal. And I think the three words that keep coming to me all day are like, they should be overwhelming opponents. They should be suffocating opponents. They should be intimidating opponents. And they're not doing any of that. And so when we're talking about, is this a good team or is this a generational team? You don't see any of the signs of it being a generational team other than the names on the players' jerseys, which I think should indicate that they at least have the potential to be phenomenal. But I think we've seen they're far short of that. So we'll go through the moments in this game. We'll give out some awards. But I think that question of how good are they and how good do they really want to fight to be is going to be the theme not just of this episode, but of the next few weeks and potentially the rest of the Javier Mascherano era, however long that lasts.
And I think for us to be just more than good, for us to be exceptional, it takes a lot more than just 11 players on the pitch. It has to be the bench, it has to be the coaching staff, it has to be the club from front to end. Every single person involved in the running of the club has to live up to that standard every single day. And us as fans as well have to obviously feed into that. That's the expectations that have been set for this club. That's the expectations with which we go into every single game, thinking that this is not a normal MLS team that's going to go out and maybe get a result on the road, but most likely lose. This is an MLS team that would go out and absolutely dominate on the road and get a result like we did last season. Right now, not all functions of the team or of the club are on the same page. There's definitely some sort of incongruency from the top to the bottom, and I'm sure we're going to get more into it. But let's start with the kickoff in the Minnesota
Well,
game. Understand why Inter Miami lost 4-1.
okay, well, before we do, let's run through a few questions from the chat because once we get into the Minnesota game, we like to get sort of dive into it and maybe we won't get to some of these questions till the very end. So let's just hit them first. Ace says that match against the Red Bulls was a fluke. I think that's been this team. They also had an incredible game against LAFC at home 3 weeks before that, but that was also the fluke. And now if you look at the past 10 games for Inter Miami, they've won 3, including the 2 we just mentioned, and then that Columbus Crew game in Cleveland where they didn't really look like a deserving winner. They've lost 5 of their last 10 games. They've been embarrassed twice. They've lost at home. They've lost away. They've gotten shut out. They've given up 1 million goals. I think you were the one who said this last night, that they've given up 12 goals in their last 4 games. They don't score enough goals on a regular basis. I know if you look at the overall number, it's probably not that bad because they've had a few 4-goal games in there, but like on a consistent basis, they're not putting up predictably comfortable offense.
And the chances aren't there, yeah.
Right, the chances aren't there. And so, like, this is not a great team and in terms of how they're firing right now, but they do have an incredible amount of talent to still be able to produce those fluky moments, and I expect those to continue, which is why I would never write them off on Wednesday night when they play San Jose. They could go in there and win 4-1 because they do have that potential, but we're not going to get that type of thing consistently until major changes are made. Nolan says, do you guys think the Big Four will play against San Jose? Just FYI, they traveled straight from Minnesota to San Jose, which does change my opinion. If they had come back to South Florida, I would have guessed Messi probably wouldn't have traveled with them out to San Jose. But since they went straight to, I imagine they're going to at least be available.
Yeah.
Okay, let's get into the game. I wanted to get those through real quick. 32nd minute. Longwani scores. Okay, let's be more serious. Inter Miami comes out with a new formation. It's a 4-3-3. First time we've seen that all year. They have 3 true midfielders. They don't really have any true forwards, even though it's clear Javier Mascherano sees Benjamin Kramaski as a wide forward and Telasco Segovia as sort of advanced player. And obviously Lionel Messi is. But they don't have Suarez. Alan Obando probably not available. Fafa Picault was a last-minute scratch. Tadeo Allende, available off the bench, doesn't get the start. So they start without a real attacking centerpiece. They play with 3 midfielders. Pretty conservative defensively, aside from Jordi Alba, who was given a lot more freedom to get forward. That was the game plan. And I think, to be positive, I think that was probably the right game plan. And I think there was some real positives that we saw in the minutes here and there from this team in that first half.
Yeah, the first 10 minutes that we played, we actually executed our plan a lot more and a lot better than the rest of the game. The commentator said that Minnesota is basically not being able to play because Inter Miami is controlling not just the possession, but we're actually doing a lot more threatening things with it. I saw a lot more different tactics in this game than I have seen in the last 4 or 5. As you mentioned, Jordi Alba stepping up a little bit more, getting involved in the attack was definitely an instruction from Javier Mascherano. We utilized that space really well. Unfortunately, the chances that he created didn't necessarily come off, but that's okay. We still put balls in dangerous positions. I thought our counter pressing with our midfield 3 was really good. All 3 of them functioning together like a unit, winning the ball back as soon as we lose it. The counter press coming into play, winning the ball high, and then creating chances there was, I think, very efficient. And again, an instruction. I saw Yannick Bright playing slightly higher up at times, then Redondo switching out with him. So there was definitely a plan for one of the 2 to stay up, and then Busquets and the other one to just sit back and distribute the ball as soon as we win it. Because what Yannick Bright was doing that high up was winning the ball, passing it into Busquets, and then Busquets would switch it out to the left side to Alba. And that I thought worked really well for the first 10 minutes. And then after that, it all just fell apart.
It
And I
wasn't.
have a reason, but I'm
It
going
was more than
to.
10 minutes. It was like
Yeah, more
25
than
to
10
30.
minutes. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Because even Jordi Alba, even in the 22nd, 26th, 28th minute, I was writing in my notes, he had some dangerous balls put in. There's one 36th minute, I think, where Noah Allen overlaps Jordi Alba, and then he puts in a dangerous ball from that left side. So clearly, as you mentioned, the emphasis was win the ball in the midfield, either get it to Messi and let him do his thing, or get the ball out to Alba and have Alba whip in crosses. And that I thought was creating danger in a way that we haven't seen a ton of from Inter Miami this year. And so my initial instinct was the game plan could have worked. Now,
Yep.
it's tough to go into a game without a striker or like a real like in the box scorer. I do think Tadeo Allende can be that guy. I do think Fafa Picault can be that guy. Obviously, Alan Obando and Suarez can be that guy. But aside from Allende, none of them were available. And so that's a tough situation. But I think generally speaking, you had the right game plan. And it was working to a degree where you had a lot of second balls won in the midfield. Like the midfield battle looked pretty good for Inter Miami.
It
The
wasn't a
problem
battle
was-
because Inter Miami was just
right. Okay.
dominating in the
Fair.
middle. Yeah.
Fair. And it looks good in a way that we haven't seen a ton of this year. The real problem came, predictably, when Minnesota hit in transition because they have good athletes that are used to doing this, and they were going to hit occasionally in transition. And so now you're relying on your goalkeeper, your defensive midfielder, and most importantly, your center backs to help protect your defense. And it felt like we were just being outclassed on a talent perspective in that phase of the game. And so my first real issue with this game plan is not what they did with the midfield. It's not what they were doing in the final third. That was always going to be difficult considering who was available. But it's the personnel they put in the back line who I thought got rinsed almost every single time they were forced to make a play. They couldn't do it. And so you saw the danger first in the 11th minute. There was an Olois Shei goal that it was kind of a lucky offsides. Lujan steps up to try and deflect the ball, takes himself out of position, but he also puts the defender offsides. But they do get the breakthrough in the 32nd minute. Hlongwane scores, and all of a sudden it felt to me like for the rest of the first half, there's a little bit of panic from Inter Miami. They didn't really know how to react to it. They didn't really know how to regain the initiative. And everything we had talked about with Jordi Alba down the left side and the midfield winning a lot of those second balls high up the field, that all felt like it started to fade away almost as soon as Minnesota scored.
And that's the thing, right? I think for the first 25 minutes, Minnesota didn't really understand how Inter Miami was trying to play. So they struggled a little bit to just keep up with us. And they were trying to figure out our tactics as well. Once they got a fair few opportunities on the break, they got a little bit more confident and started playing out a bit more. Again, I think you absolutely nailed it. The problem was not the tactics. But you know, going into this game, that Minnesota is a counter-attacking team. This is a team in the MLS that has the least number of possession, and they're sitting second in the West. So clearly, their way of attacking is basically catching teams on the break. They have the players to do that. Their structure basically confirms what they're trying to do. And when you go in with this game plan, you need a certain type of players. And I'm not going to start with the back because that's the obvious bit, right? The personnel, if your plan is to put the ball out to Alba and make sure that he's the one putting in those dangerous crosses, you need a more target man in there. You need somebody who can get on the end of those crosses, or somebody who's going to be a commanding presence in the box. So I don't understand why you didn't go with Tadeo Allende, who would have been the natural replacement for Luis Suarez. And I thought Benjamin Kramaski should have been on the bench and Tadeo Allende should have been on the pitch as a number 9 if those were your tactics. Secondly, for me, is the most obvious one is why would you pick your center back and right back who are the slowest, who don't necessarily offer anything in transition, when you know your midfield is going to be pushing high up because that's the game plan? You know all three of them are going to be involved in the counter pressing. This is a team that loves to counter attack. So if we're going to get hurt on the break, why would you just not put your fastest defenders in the pitch? Noah Allen, good selection. Lujan, terrible selection. I would have 100% gone with Toto Aviles here because he would have been able to sweep up. That's basically what he does as a defender. Sweep up when Inter Miami gets broken down on the counter attack. You can maybe give a couple of instructions to Yannick Bright to sit deeper and let Busquets and Redondo be slightly higher up in the counter press. But that, I think, is secondary. The first bit for me was Lujan and his slowness in defense that really caught us. So the game plan was there, but then you don't pick the personnel to execute it. So how would you expect Inter Miami to be able to perform that game plan on the pitch?
I would go into a minute and a half diatribe about how this coach doesn't understand how to pick his own team.
We've done that before, so
Exactly.
might as well move on to the next point.
46th minute, or I guess first minute of first half stoppage time. There is a long throw in, and this is when Minnesota gets that second goal. It is thrown into the front side of net, the near post, and Nick Romero, who is being guarded by Gonzalo Lujan on this set piece, I guess, just sort of heads it back into a dangerous area to the back post, and Markinick is able to just head it in. Jordi Alba, I think, falls asleep a little bit on that second ball for the second goal for Minnesota, but I think for me, the biggest blame goes to Gonzalo Lujan, who was supposed to mark Nick Romero, does not put a physical body on him, doesn't really try and win the ball, and as a result allows Romero to get a nice, easy header to the back post. I understand Jordi Alba has some culpability there, but for me, the second ball is always less predictable and harder to defend. You got to stop that on that initial throw-in, and that was on Gonzalo Lujan. We've already seen him get rinsed for athleticism. This was a lack of physicality that came back to bite Inter Miami. So when we're talking about how does he fit into this team, he's not athletic. He doesn't have physicality. It's hard to understand.
And that's from the coaching staff. Again, Minnesota, a team that everyone knows is very dangerous on the set pieces. 2 of the 3 or 3 of the 4 goals that we concede are from set pieces. That's embarrassing. That's a poorly coached team. Our mindset in defense, we just switch off. And every single time Minnesota got an opportunity on set piece, they looked threatening. Lujan lost that first ball. That led to the opportunity, not the throw. We conceded off a throw, which is bizarre. And this was a problem that Inter Miami had early last season. We sort of tried to fix it when we brought in Nico Freire, and then feels like we're back again in that element of just conceding from set pieces. And it was embarrassing all around. And that for me is down to coaching. You can blame individual players, obviously, for not being switched on, but you have to be on about these situations, these set piece situations.
You know, this is something we haven't talked about a lot this year, but the set pieces, both offensively and defensively for this team,
have been
pretty
terrible.
Offensively, they don't create much aside from that Messi to Alba at the top of the box play that they've run every single game. But aside from that, they have very little threat offensively on set pieces, and defensively, you know, they haven't been phenomenal either. Especially yesterday, which was a little disappointing because you had a lot of physical and tall players, especially from the midfield, that you kind of got beat with a center back who's your least physical center back. It's just very disappointing. Inter Miami does come out in the second half. A few adjustments. Jordi Alba playing high up the left the whole game. Chelo Weigandt given some freedom to go high up on the right. It did make a little bit of difference, and this was Inter Miami's best sort of 10-minute period of the game. Coming out of half, a lot more aggressive, trying to be suffocating, knowing they needed a result, and it pays off immediately. 48th minute, 48th minute, Messi puts the ball in the back of the net. It's 2-1, and I was thinking Inter Miami's going to find a way out of this, despite the fact that we've seen so many sort of mistakes, but all of a sudden it felt like, okay, actually Miami is going to fight, and we've seen them do this so many times over the last year and a half. They fight, they make sure they get an opportunity at the end of the game, they make sure they get at least a point, at least a result, because they have this sort of tenacity to never quit and belief in themselves. And we've seen that so much that you felt 2-1, they're going to be okay, at least for this game. Is that how you felt? Because that 10 minutes felt to me like the best clearly for Inter Miami of the game.
Absolutely. We completely pinned them in their own half, and that was the perfect time to score. Straight out the back from the second half, early goal, and now you're back in it, just one more goal. And this Inter Miami team has shown time and time again that they can score 2-3 as soon as they get that first one. So I was actually really excited because I was like, okay, game on. We're actually going to try and put something on because it looked good. The offense looked good in the first half of the first half and in the first half of the second half as well for the 10-15 minutes. It looked like we were actually trying to bombard opportunities on their goal. I don't think the advanced statistics would agree with me on that because it didn't seem like we created too many clear-cut opportunities, but we were dominant and we were trying to go for that second goal. When you do that, you obviously leave yourselves vulnerable. But
Well, and that was the point of the game where it felt like Inter Miami was trying to be, and I'll keep going back to these three words: overwhelming, suffocating, and intimidating. And it felt like there was a real response from Minnesota in saying, okay, we might be in trouble if we let this get out of hand. We can't let the momentum get away from us. I should add that Tadeo Allende came on at halftime, so they had a new threat in that front three to sort of distract, and Bodies Redondo came off. So the midfield was able to stay sort of intense with that high press without the third midfielder in Redondo. So it looked really good. And then ultimately the third goal, which, as we found out later, ends the game, 68th minute, Chelo Weigandt own goal. We've seen Chelo do this a bunch over the course of this season where he kind of has like this very composed, nonchalant header back to Oscar Stadi, who can, because it's coming off his chest or off his head, he can grab it instead of if it was just a pass. This is the time it bit him in the butt. He gets a little bit of a push from behind where it's not a foul or anything, but it just throws him off balance enough that he's not able to control the header. He pushes it way too hard into the back of the net. Nothing Ustadi could have done on that. It was sort of this, I'm going to build my confidence and composure on trying to win us possession. That came back to bite him, and ultimately it's an own goal. I don't want to blame him too much for that moment because it's one of those things where it does happen to players all over the world all the time. And I think the big moment, the big talking point here is that Javier Mascherano admitted after the game that goal ended it for Inter Miami. So everything I just said about them scoring that first goal, getting back into the game and showing fight and tenacity and a never say die attitude, it was all wrong. It was all wrong. As soon as one more thing went wrong, they kind of mentally collapsed, and even the coach was willing to admit that. And you know, we saw substitutions not long after that sort of showed his capitulation. They do score another goal in the 70th minute in transition. Probably want to blame one of the midfielders for not picking up Robin Lott out of the midfield, but ultimately it's 4-1 and the game is over.
that 3-1 was also a set piece, right?
Yeah.
And that, I think, sucked the air out of the room because Inter Miami didn't have anything after that. And then they went on to score that fourth goal. It was just dismal. And honestly, I thought it could be worse because this Inter Miami team just seems to have a habit of capitulating once things don't go for them. We saw that against Dallas as well. That was the first time that we actually didn't have. We gave up a 2-goal lead. And then this time, even though we had Messi on the pitch, even though we had Busquets on the pitch, it just felt like heads dropped after that 3-1. And that was about it. Game over.
Let's sit on that because I think that's one of the scariest things about this game. And Javier Mascherano had some comments in the post-game press conference that I don't think indicated a ton of resiliency, a ton of willingness to fight. I don't want to say he blamed the players. He certainly took responsibility for the loss, but he also was sort of implying that the players weren't doing what he wanted them to do. And I take that as the players don't believe in you. I'm also in a mood where I'm not feeling great about Javier Mascherano, so maybe that's just my biased lens viewing that. But I don't think the players believe in Javier Mascherano right now, and I don't blame them because I also don't believe in him. So this feels like a capitulation of a team that doesn't feel like they're going to get anything going because they don't believe in the atmosphere of the team. and the coaching staff to put them in a position to sort of make a comeback. And this is what happens when things don't go your way if you're that type of team.
And the results haven't been dire in the sense that we still have been getting a 4-1 win against
they've been
LA.
bad.
No, but they've been papered over by a couple of good not
Fair.
performances, but results here and there. So it almost feels like, oh, okay, that was one bad game. Now we have a good game. Then we have a bad game again. That's what it feels like on paper. But I feel like the performances have been dismal since that LAFC game. That second leg against LAFC after that has just been a downhill slope. And the players sense that. They feel it. They see that something's off on the pitch. Because Inter Miami is not performing, not dominating, not creating as many chances as they should be, as they're used to creating. And that's when that sense of hesitation sets in, where they're like, how are you doing the right thing on the pitch? We had our heads drop because nobody believed that Inter Miami, with the way we are playing, is going to be able to overcome a 2-goal lead. We're not going to be able to come back from 3-1 because everyone on that pitch was like, with these tactics and the way we're playing right now, there's no chance. And that's why heads dropped. Javier Mascherano's interview was very telling in the sense that him saying that I need to convince players of my tactics and my plan means that there's definitely at least some, if not all, players in that locker room who don't necessarily believe in what he's doing. So not all's good in that backroom staff, not all's good in that locker room, and he needs to get the players on board as soon as possible or change the game plan as soon as possible. Otherwise, he's not going to be here for long. It's in the body language of the players. Now it's shaping up in the results as well. And very soon, fans, they're already clamoring for his exit, but it's going to get really bad. So you have to make the right choices, starting from personnel selection to game plan to then executing that game plan. And it starts from Javier Mascherano.
Yeah, well said. Let's talk about Minnesota for a minute because I do want to give them some flowers. Obviously, we are an Inter Miami podcast and we're Inter Miami fans, so we are viewing everything from an Inter Miami lens. That is a good Minnesota team, and you are going on the road. As you mentioned, they actually have more points than us now. I think they're fourth in the Supporter Shield table. Inter Miami, I think, is sixth now. And so they're having a good season. They have some good players, pace going the other way, guys that can finish, sound defensively, a solid goalkeeper. And so I want to give them credit because it shouldn't be surprising that the fifth place team in the MLS in the East goes on the road to a Minnesota team and loses. That shouldn't be surprising. It's only surprising that it's Inter Miami because we think of Inter Miami as the Supporter Shield champions and the favorites for every trophy they compete in. But if you really look at the reality, we are the fourth place team or the fifth place team in the East, and we're going on the road to the second best team in the Western Conference. That is not easy to do if you're the fifth place team in the East. You should expect to lose that game. And so I do want to give them some credit because they're not an awful team that beat up on a down Inter Miami team. It's nervy because those are the teams you're going to have to beat if you want to win the MLS Cup, if you want to make it to the MLS Cup, if you want to win the Leagues Cup or whatever. And so for Inter Miami, it's a problem that they can't overcome that, but it shouldn't be surprising because this is a good Minnesota team.
Absolutely. They had their game plan spot on, and they didn't get phased when Inter Miami was on top for the first 15, 20 minutes. They stuck to get their game plan. They saw a couple of opportunities, and they executed it. Kudos to Eric Ramsey for the way he drilled that team because they knew exactly what they wanted to do, and at the end of the day, they deserved that result. Nothing more to add. They were a very good team yesterday, and Inter Miami was second best, and that's that. I don't think you can't come out of this game saying, oh, it shouldn't have been 4-1. Minnesota got lucky. No, none of that. I think they deserve to win. They played really well and good for them. I will say the Minnesota Twitter admin has been absolutely cooking Inter Miami online, and it's just horrible to watch. It makes my heart sink even further, but they have the bragging rights. So,
you know what I do want to say? Inter Miami has gotten a ton of hate from MLS fans across the league and being called, bought, not built, and all that kind of stuff. And we saw that yesterday as well. talking about culture and all that stuff. And I got to say, if Inter Miami's not going to be that good, they're going to be good but not phenomenal, we should get less hate from people. Like,
Yeah.
the rest of the league should calm down a little bit, because we haven't done anything that has sort of demanded all this hate. And we don't look like we're going to do it anytime soon. So I guess enjoy it, but it feels like unwarranted at this point.
Exactly.
We're just an average, an above average MLS team.
Listen, we got
I get
beat
why it
4-1
comes
by
back.
Vancouver, Minnesota. You're no special. We do that every other week.
Exactly. We might have to change this to a comedy show based on how this has gone lately. Okay, we talked about the midfield in the first half. They changed it up in the second half, take Redondo out, and it looks much more like our traditional lineup. I don't know if there's anything more that needs to be said there, other than that I feel like should be a tool in the toolkit for Javier Mascherano, and I have a feeling he's going to bury it forever, unfortunately. One-dimensional attack. It's hard for me to blame them based on who was available in this game. But I'm happy to let you blame them.
Yeah, I think there's an element to this as well, because I wanted to talk about this. Inter Miami has become very predictable in the final third. Super predictable. The ball yesterday, the entire game, the ball went out to Jordi Alba. He tried to put in a cross, and that was all the game plan that we had. Every time Messi tried to go central, it did not look good. He was not able to beat his man. The ball would break free for Minnesota to then catch us on the counter. I'm looking at this team and I'm thinking there's an entire right-hand side of the pitch that feels completely useless. I thought Benjamin Kramaski was not utilized at all yesterday. Chelo Weigandt got up in the second half, but I think it's at the expense of, okay, we're going to do it one way and then we're going to do it the other way. There's no simultaneous attacking options from both sides. And I get it that you don't want to push both your fullbacks up forward at the same time, especially against Minnesota, who is so good and quick in counter-pressing and counter-attacking. So I understand that. But even then, you have to play through your 11 players to be able to shift defenses around and to be able to create those opportunities and move the ball quickly. And we're just not doing that. It's the same pattern we see every single time. Busquets to Messi, Messi to Alba, Alba to Messi, and that's it. Done.
Okay, so the dude Abide says that that he thinks we're giving Javier Mascherano too much credit, saying he had a plan. He has a formation, but the execution was probably players making decisions only. I do think there's something to this. I don't think he has some super detailed system where he needs guys to show up in these spaces to help the whole thing work out. I think he does rely on the talent of the individuals to shine through. And the things he's doing is mostly like, hey, Jordi, don't be too aggressive, play more conservative. Hey, Chelo, don't get too high up, we need you back defensively. And then he's responsible for formations and he's responsible for picking personnel. But it's not all working together. And so when you will have really struggled for offense and you've been very conservative with the midfield, you've been very conservative with playing high up the field, which is something that I think he is instructing the team to do, you are now taking away opportunities from Lionel Messi. Obviously, Luis Suarez didn't play yesterday, but you're taking away opportunities from him. They start to fade off. They get frustrated. They're overexerting themselves trying to overcome the lack of opportunities and their own, lack of success by their own standards. They're playing sort of trying too hard to do what they can do, and they're not being given real options outside of just doing what they can do. And so it's not hard to see why everything offensively is going wrong. I did think Jordi Alba playing high up the field was a step in the right direction, but I'm worried that Javier Mascherano is going to see, we gave up 4 goals, we can't do that anymore. And so it's like, it's almost like one step forward, 2 steps back. I'm worried that's what it's going to be. So I agree with
absolutely.
you. They are not dynamic enough offensively. And when you have Luis Suarez and Lionel Messi and Jordi Alba and, Fafa Picault and Segovia and Allende, like, you have the pieces to be incredibly dynamic, and they are not. And that is pretty scary.
Yeah, I think and I fear that against San Jose, we're going to go back to that defensive setup where Jordi Alba is just going to stay back as much as possible. And then
I agree.
We're going to try and make things happen through Messi. this might be a justification for Javier Mascherano to be like, listen, we tried something different. We got battered 4-1. We're going to go back to my defensive tactics. And it's clear that it's defensive tactics. He's prioritizing defense first, and that's understandable. But it's coming at the expense of Inter Miami's offensive talent, because this team is not built to be a defensive machine. This team is built to be an offense first sort of a setup,
and that's why it's not acceptable, because in this league where you can't spread your talent around evenly, you've spent your money on attacking players, and
you have to utilize them.
Right, you have to maximize them. That's how you have success in the MLS, and we are cutting our best players sort of at the knees by not providing them with the support and help they need. And yes, you are more likely to win a game 4-3 if you play the way you should be playing than 1-0. But A, that's way more exciting. B, it means you're never out of a game. C, that's how this team is designed to be played. And D, I think you have better personnel right now than Inter Miami's ever had to defend in that situation, with Noah Allen stepping up and with Toto Aviles becoming better and Maxi Falcone. And yet you're playing guys like Gonzalo Lujan. So okay. Let's talk about Julian Gressel. He gets his revenge. He comes on for Minnesota. They win 4-1. There was some comments after the game by some of his teammates where he said, you play them for 30 minutes, they're going to be very good, and then after that, they're going to fall off, and you're going to have your opportunity. And lo and behold, 32nd minute, Minnesota breaks through. That feels like a real inside scouting report, and I've heard Javier Mascherano over the last week, and we will touch on this again. Yannick Bright can't play 90 minutes. And yet Lionel Messi and Luis Suarez and Jordi Alba and Sergio Busquets and Chelo Weigandt and Gonzalo Lujan, who are all less athletic than Yannick Bright, those guys can play 90 minutes game in, game in, game out, game in, game out, game in, game out. I don't know what to say about this.
Is it an athletic thing or is it a concentration thing? What is it? Because obviously Julian Gressel struck gold with those comments, but I wouldn't have pointed that out before the game if I was the one scouting into Miami and being like, oh, play for 30 minutes, withhold the pressure, and then after that, they're going to fall off. So it's interesting how he came to that conclusion, and right conclusion as well. And I think this is what I'm going to pay more attention to in the next few games to see how Inter Miami's levels drop off over the course of the game. And maybe it's a athleticism thing. Maybe it's a concentration thing. Who knows? Well, it's an interesting point.
I took it as they're too old to play hard for 90 minutes. And so that's where I was going back with my 22-year-old midfielder that can seemingly run for days. And he can't play 90 minutes coming off. Even yesterday, comes off in the 77th minute in Yannick Bright. But Busquets and Lionel Messi and Jordi Alba and Luis Suarez are playing 90 minutes all the time. It's crazy to me. And the less rangy of your young players, guys like Gonzalo Lujan, guys like Telasco Segovia, they have also played heavy minutes. Now, Segovia has been a little bit, that's been reduced a little bit of late. But it does feel like they're going to run out of legs. And especially once the big four start to get tired, there's not enough quality around the rest of the pitch for them to still be an effective team. And it's weird to me because I've seen Inter Miami go to the LA Galaxy and get the equalizer in the 95th minute. I've seen them do this time and time and time again over the last year and a half since this Messi team was built, where they can provide offense late in the game and they can still have the energy. Even earlier this year, Telasco Segovia and Lionel Messi combined against NYCFC in the MLS opener to get that 95th minute whatever equalizer to get this game, to get 1 point in that game. But it just feels like they don't have enough quality outside of the big four because of the personnel we've chosen to put out and surround them with. I also am reminded that last year we did see this with Tata Martino a lot mid-season, where they would press really high for 20 minutes, oftentimes get 2 goals out of it, and then be a much more conservative for the rest of the game.
But we also had Diego Gomez, who was an absolute beast. And then,
yeah. I don't know what to say, man. That's and by the way, these are professional athletes. Like, there's no excuse for only being
absolutely none.
Maybe
but the excuse is that they're being run into the ground, right? That's the excuse. They need to be utilized better, rotated better, play all of your players in the 26-man squad that you have, because all of them are high quality players. But apparently that's not how it works.
Should we get to awards?
Yeah, let's please get to awards.
Inter Miami, 4-1 loss. Probably not the best time to pick 6 awards, but I will say I tried to be positive with it. If you've never seen the show before, we give out 6 awards on this match: a Heron of the match, a Heron that flew north, and 2 individual awards each, because you went first last time. Nope, because I went first last time. I'm letting you go first this time. Saur, in this 4-1 loss, who was the best player for Inter Miami?
I think Sergio Busquets has to be man of the match. I thought that midfield 3 looked really good. Probably the brightest spark on the pitch. Redondo getting taken off at halftime, I thought didn't necessarily change our midfield that much. And for me, Sergio Busquets was at the heart of it. He was driving out the counter press, pushing Yannick Bright and Redondo in the right direction, commanding the middle. But then also, as soon as he received the ball, he was very good at distributing it and getting it into the right spots, whether it's into the feet of Messi, whether it's driving it out all the way to Alba. I thought he did really, really well with that. And overall, I thought he had a fantastic performance compared to some of the other players on the pitch who are not called Messi. So for me, I think Sergio Busquets was the only bright spark in this. Otherwise, quite poor performance from the rest of the starting 11. That's all I have to say on this.
Yeah, I thought it had to be him or Bright. And so Busquets gets it. I thought there was a real shout last game for him to get the Heron of the match, and so it feels very justified that he gets it. This time, he's been really good lately, actually.
Yeah.
The one player
really
that
good.
seems to really benefit from this system, or at least isn't harmed by this Javier Mascherano defensive system, is Sergio Busquets. Yesterday, he was going through people's legs with the nutmegs and all this other stuff. Really impressive performance. And there's a world
he
where...
had 2 nutmegs. I forgot about that.
Yeah,
that's why
there's a world where we're scoring a few goals and we're winning a bunch of games 2-0, where he looks like he's the best player in the team, but because he is a facilitator, he's not really able to impact the scoreboard in quite the same way, and that's unfortunate because of how well he's playing. But I think this is the right choice. Anything else on Busquets?
No, nothing more to add.
Okay, well then I am very happy to announce my Heron that flew north, because last game I gave him the Heron in the match, probably in anticipation of giving him a negative award soon. I wanted to give a little bit of karmic justice to Chelo Weigandt. He's had some solid games lately. I don't think he was like awful in this game, but if you powerhead a ball into your own goal, that is doing the wrong thing, which is the essence of Heron that flew north. I didn't think he was the worst Inter Miami player in this game, but that individual moment is the one that kind of ended it for Inter Miami. And so that is a Chelo Weigandt Heron that flew north award. No doubt about it.
Completely justified. There were obviously shouts for some other players as well to receive this award. Gonzalo Lujan comes to mind, Oscar Starry for letting in 4, a few others, but I think you can't give it to anybody else but the person who scored for the other team. And honestly, killed all hopes Inter Miami had, sucked the room out of the air, and that was really unfortunate. Don't want to blame him too much, but he did put the ball at the back of our net. And then also, I think in a couple of other goals, he was a little bit culpable, like the rest of the back four. I thought he was caught ball watching a couple of times, and his positioning at times can be really questionable. And I think he's a fine player, but he has moments in the game that can be really costly for this team. And today was one that definitely killed our hope.
Listen, the guy has 2 goals in 2 games. I mean, what more could you ask from a fullback?
Don't get started on that, man, please.
He's league average. That's what he is. He's a league average fullback. And league average fullbacks have solid games. They have a couple good games, and they have a couple bad games. And that's exactly what Chelo Weigandt did. He had a below average game with a really unfortunate moment. I don't want to kill him for it, but certainly it's the essence of this award, so he gets this one.
He would be the starting right back on a team that's 5th or 6th in the Eastern Conference, and lo and behold, we are. So,
well, maybe a little bit lower than that, I think. He could be the starting right back on a team that makes the playoffs, no doubt about that. But he's not going to be the starting right back on a team that is doing generational special things. And I think
was DeAndre Yedlin better?
They're very similar, honestly.
Yeah.
Lots of energy, lots of explosiveness, but not particularly good offensively or
But our
defensively.
expectations from Yedlin were lower.
I think so. I think so.
Okay.
Okay, what is your first award?
I have a fair few awards, but I'm going to go for the Dr. Hulk Award. And I've been sitting on this one for a while. And I should also tell you that all my awards today are superhero themed because, let's be honest, Inter Miami at this point needs a superhero to save us.
Can I ask you one hint? Is this an ironic award or is this not an ironic award?
No, this is not an ironic award.
I'm going to guess Yannick Bright because he is probably the strongest player on the team. Is Yannick Bright?
It is Yannick Bright. But
I-
not only is he the most strongest player on this team, that was wrong English. Not only is he the strongest player on this team, he has now developed into a very smart, tactically astute, and a high IQ player. There was a moment in the first half when Inter Miami was dominating where he had a ball passed into him in a position that usually Messi is in, and he took the ball, turned beautifully with it into space, and then got fouled down and taken out. His passing, his offensive ability, his offensive involvement, his ball carrying have all just completely made him into a player that's like not just a number 6 anymore. He's not just that Hulk smash, big, strong guy who's going to show up and destroy everyone. Of course, he is that. But he's also developing these skills that really get the team moving forward in offense. And I'm really enjoying what I'm seeing from him. We talked about it yesterday. He's one of the only positives that I'm seeing in terms of development from this team right now. And I see something new every single time from Yannick Bright. I think it's been a couple of games since we've given him an award. So I wanted to give him that because he's not only Hulk anymore, but he's got like the acumen and IQ of Bruce Banner. And because of that, he's now Dr. Hulk.
I have seen people on Twitter over the last 24 hours trying to diagnose what's wrong with Inter Miami, and I feel like they're like at the very early stages of seeing what's wrong, and they're like missing how deep and big the problem goes. And I think we're the opposite of that with Yannick Bright, where we saw how deep and talented this player was from the get-go and for so long, and we sang his praises, and we have for a very long time. And he was nice enough to come on the show, and that was great. But the truth is, like, he is so good at the one thing that he does that now he can just play around with all the other things and get better and better and better. You said it yesterday that he's going to leave soon. I think you're right. This feels like the most ready to jump to Europe player of all of our young players, and that includes Telasco Segovia and Kramaski and Noah Allen. Like, this is the dude. If I was a scout from Germany or Italy or something, this is the guy I would want. He does continue to show he's got more tools in his toolkit. I think we have to have a conversation about Yannick Bright. So I just want to ask you, do you have anything more to say about him from this game?
No, but what a phenomenal award, right?
Well, you really pulled it together with the Bruce Banner thing, yeah. So there was a controversy earlier this week. On Tuesday or Wednesday, Javier Mascherano was asked, what is it that is preventing Yannick Bright from getting 90 minutes, or why is there a debate between Yannick Bright and Federico Redondo? Something along those lines. And Javier Mascherano said he's not ready to play 90 minutes yet, which was weird because he's a 22-year-old midfielder and he played plenty of 90-minute games last year. But that was sort of the first explanation we've got as to why Yannick Bright doesn't play every game. And then Yannick Bright got in front of the cameras 2 days later or a day later and was asked about it. And he said, I've played 90 minutes plenty of times. So this feels like another example. And Yannick Bright just happened to be the player this happened to. But I could have seen the same exact end product from about 7 different players on this team and 3 players that have moved on from this team already. There is a disconnect in the relationship and understanding of this coach and how he talks about some of his players and the actual players and how they feel about themselves and how they feel their role in this team fits. And that is terrible to happen from a coach. It's terrible to happen at your office job where your team leader is supposed to understand how to make pieces fit together. The fact that this is happening with a coach of a soccer team who's being paid, I don't know, $1 million a year, whatever he's getting paid, is crazy. But he doesn't have a handle on the culture and fit of his own players and of his locker room. And I think not only are we seeing that on the field, but now we're starting to see it spill out a little bit. This isn't about Yannick Bright. This is about the larger picture of this coach not understanding what his players' mindsets are, where they're at physically or mentally or talent-wise. But this is just another example, and now it's starting to spill out into the media, of a disconnect between this coach and this team.
One, I think for me, the most important aspect of being a coach is man management. And an important aspect of being a man manager is understanding what your players are thinking, what they're capable of doing, and what they can achieve on that pitch. Javier Mascherano doesn't seem to have that. He doesn't seem to be a good communicator because the messages that he's sending across to the team seem to be contradictory to what the team believes they can do. And your job is not to tell them you can only do this and you can only do that in terms of their achievements. You have to understand what their idea and sense is. So if Yannick Bright is saying, listen, coach, I can go 90, but Mascherano thinks, okay, no, I don't think you can go 90 right now. Let's limit your minutes. You don't go out in the media and say that Yannick Bright's not capable of playing 90 minutes. That's how you create discontent, because you're basically saying the player's not fit enough. And
that feels like an excuse to me. Like, it's, why are you picking Federico Redondo? Oh, Yannick Bright's not fit enough.
Yeah.
And so you're throwing your player under the bus, but it's obviously not because Yannick Bright, again, a 22-year-old midfielder, isn't capable of playing 90 minutes. I'm sure he's done it already this season. He did it plenty of times last season.
He did it so many times last season. And it's not like he's come back overweight and unfit or whatever.
He can,
he can run into the ground for full 90, more than that. And it's just absurd going out in the media and saying that, because it just creates a complete, as you said, disconnect between the players and the coaching staff, right?
Well, and it doesn't create it, it exposes it. And Pythias says it here. The explanation by Mascherano about Bright was proven to be disingenuous, which presents a whole new problem in itself. And this is such a weird conversation to be having about a coach, because you expect coaches of professional sporting teams to have proven they have leadership capacity in a locker room, to understand how to communicate well with people, to understand how to make team dynamics work. And that's the type of thing I see in my own life when I have a work project with coworkers and there's a team leader. And if they don't understand what they're doing, you start getting excuses and things being said that aren't actually true. And it all can fall apart because the leader wasn't good enough at communicating and building this relationship and building team chemistry and all of those types of things to be on the same page as every player. I see that in my real life from people that aren't supposed to be great leaders. They're just being put in front of a project or team leader or organizational leader or whatever. But they're just regular people. But coaches are supposed to already have that, or they wouldn't get hired and paid huge money to do that. And so I'm not even seeing this as a soccer problem. I'm seeing this as I don't think this person can be in charge of 20 people because he doesn't have the leadership.
This is a man manager problem.
To do it. Right, but even below professional soccer standards, it's human standards. And by the way, not everyone is a leader. Not everyone can be in charge of an organization. Not everyone has that personality. And the fact that we haven't seen Javier Mascherano ever do this before makes this totally plausible that he has gotten these gigs because of his playing career and maybe his tactical knowledge or whatever, but that there's no actual evidence that he can build consensus within a room, that he can communicate effectively with players, especially players of different nationalities and potentially ones that speak different languages. And now we're just starting to see excuses because he has to face the media every day and his choices are being criticized and he's making bad decisions and now he's trying to justify them. Like, this doesn't feel like a Yannick Bright conditioning problem. This feels like a Javier Mascherano doesn't understand how to communicate with his players problem. And that is a huge, huge deal. And it's just another example of it feels like everything's unraveling all at once.
All right, what's your next award, Scotty?
Do you agree with that?
Absolutely. Absolutely agree with that. There's a lot of issues, and I think you've absolutely nailed the head with this one that you have to manage personalities. You need to know how to deal with the players. It's not just about giving them tactics and putting them on the pitch. Anyways, we can have a full midweek conversation about this topic, and I don't want to get into that. So give me your award.
Okay, I will just say you did take my Yannick Bright award, so please lower your expectations for my next awards. But my first award is the Wings Don't Mean You Can Fly award.
Ooh. That goes to Chelo Weigandt.
What makes you say that?
Because he's on. Oh no, that goes to Benjamin Kramaski because he's been put on the wing, and Javier Mascherano thinks that just because he's given him the wings, he should be able to fly and play the role of a winger, but it's actually he's a midfielder. So just by giving him wings, you shouldn't expect him to fly.
You absolutely nailed it, except it's Telasco Segovia and not
Fair enough.
Benjamin Kramaski.
Yeah.
But you absolutely nailed the logic. Great job. This is just such a talented player, but he's a central player. He should be playing in the midfield. And if you're not going to have a Luis Suarez, and you're not going to have a Fafa Picault, and you're not going to have an Alan Obando in that front line, you cannot reasonably expect Telasco Segovia to be the leader of your front line. That is an unbelievably unfair expectation to put on a 21-year-old kid. And it's, again, just you're putting your players in a position to fail. And while I didn't think Segovia had a particularly impressive game or a good game, like that is not what he should be
I don't blame
being
him.
asked to
Yeah.
do. He should be a midfielder. And we have, well, Javier Mascherano has decided this is a frontline player. And I will
Can I
remind
just
you,
say,
he was, hold on. I will remind you last year with Casapia in Portugal, he was playing as a defensive midfielder. And now he's playing as a winger.
yesterday, Segovia was playing in the middle more often than not because the plan was for Jordi Alba to have that space on the left-hand side so that he can make those runs. Completely understandable. But Segovia is not that player to do it because when he comes in the middle, he occupies the same line as Lionel Messi and then he becomes completely ineffective. Let me even dissect this to the most basics. Segovia does not have the skill sets to be an out-and-out winger, to exploit. He's not a fast runner who's going to carry the ball. He's a player who likes to dribble with the ball, who likes to pass and go, make intricate moves along with other players. And that's perfectly suited to what your midfielder should be doing. If you replace Segovia with Redondo and put Segovia in the midfield instead of Redondo, I guarantee you half your issues are going to get fixed because Segovia is going to be absolutely balling in the middle of the park. And then you put Fafa or Allende on the left-hand side and let them do that cutting in behind and making space for Jordi Alba because that's not Segovia's natural game. Just because he has been bought in, he's a very well-respected, well respected, but well thought of player, a talented player. You don't need to force feed him into a lineup just because you want to use him. You have to use him correctly. And as you said, you're not setting him up for success. And that's when players start to lose confidence because they'll have 2, 3, 4 bad performances and then their heads start to dip. And that's it. They've lost all confidence. He is a player who would be perfect in that middle with Bright and Sergio Busquets. And yet we haven't seen that when Messi is on the pitch. Misprofiling, right? Not understanding your players.
And we've been on this. Javier Mascherano brought him in to be a winger. Like, this wasn't a by necessity type of thing. This was Javier Mascherano saying, I want this guy to be my left winger. And it doesn't work. It doesn't work. And he's such a talented young player. By the way, we should emphasize that he's a young player because you do have to foster growth in them. He has real talent, but if you want to sell him to the Premier League, which is going to be his goal, or La Liga or whatever, like up to a bigger club, right? He wants to use Inter Miami as a stepping stone. If you want to make that happen like you did with Diego Gomez, you have to showcase his talent. And they aren't doing that because they're consistently playing him out of position. You said he doesn't have the skills. I agree with you. He's not rangy. He's not a long strider. He doesn't have real pace by, professional soccer standards. He's a guy who can get on the ball and be creative. And so the trick is you got to get him on the ball and let him be creative. And that's not what they're doing because they're playing him high up the field, trying to get him the ball in tight spaces where he doesn't have any time or space to operate. And then they're asking him to be athletic and rangy and press and make runs over the top and all these things that it's just not going to happen because that's not the type of player he is. So wings don't mean you can fly. He's a midfielder, and guess who's going to play him in the midfield?
Tata Martino.
Inter Miami's next coach. So I will say I don't think Javier Mascherano is going to be the coach much longer. Okay,
we'll find
what
out
is your
soon
second
enough.
award?
My second award, sticking to the superhero theme, is the Alfred Pennyworth Award.
I don't know who that is, so I'm going to need a hint here.
Batman and Alfred.
Is that okay? So he's the loyal butler, loyal assistant, loyal, the guy who does the dirty work for the superstar. This is Chelo Weigandt because Messi thinks that he's the loyal assistant that does all the dirty work, but we also already gave an award to Chelo, so I take that back. This is Benjamin Kramaski because he does the dirty work. I don't know. Who is this?
Alfred Pennyworth is a butler. What does a butler do? A butler serves. Somebody served absolute peaches on a plate yesterday, and that was Jordi Alba. Jordi Alba is Alfred Pennyworth to Lionel Messi's Batman. Sergio Busquets is obviously Nightwing, and Suarez is Robin. But Jordi Alba needs to be there on that field, serving the balls to Messi in dangerous positions. Yesterday was the first time we saw that in months, I think. Most dangerous Jordi Alba has looked this season. And that's no coincidence. I'm glad Javier Mascherano gave him those instructions to go up. But I'll be honest, man, if Javier Mascherano goes back to his defensive tactics, might as well not play Jordi Alba. Because you're not using him for what he's worth. He is most dangerous and he is most consistent when he's asked to go up that left-hand side. He loves to cut the ball in. He loves to put in those crosses. He can't just sit back and defend. And you shouldn't ask him to do that because that's not why we brought him here. He was the defender with the most number of goal contributions last season. There was a reason for that. And that's how you have to use him. He's Alfred. Use him to serve. Don't use him to just sit back and defend. This is not what this team is built for.
Nailed it. Every part of it. Can I change the conversation a little bit? Because I agree with everything you said and I double endorse it. Javier Mascherano has said at times this year, it's Luis Suarez. What am I going to tell him to do? He knows what he's doing. That doesn't apply to Jordi Alba, apparently, because Javier Mascherano does instruct him to not get that high up the field. He does tell Jordi Alba what to do. So I think that relationship that he espouses with Sergio Busquets and Luis Suarez and Messi about just going out there and they control what they do and they are responsible for their own actions, that's nonsense because he's absolutely telling Jordi Alba to stay back and play conservative, or he's saying, hey, you have the freedom to get forward and play the ball in, and that's exactly what he did yesterday, and Jordi Alba looked pretty good. I think if we have a striker on the field, or maybe just two, maybe you need two different attackers instead of Kramaski and Segovia, who are both midfielders, you may maybe score 2 goals in those first 30 minutes, and the entire nature of the game changes because Jordi Alba was dangerous. He was putting dangerous balls in, and he's normally not allowed to do that because of Javier Mascherano. So again, just more disingenuous things coming out of Javier Mascherano's mouth. Okay, I'll leave it at that.
I'm afraid that in the next game, Jordi Alba is going to go back to being the conservative left back because I don't think Javier Mascherano saw anything in yesterday's performance, whereas I think that was one of the most positive things.
I agree with you. I will remind you before I give out my last award that I was planning on giving one to Yannick Bright, and it threw me back that I didn't get to give that out. So my final award is, and you're going to hate this, the Wings Don't Mean You Can Fly award.
Benjamin Kramaski.
Nailed it. Same exact conversation. He's not a forward. He's a midfielder. And while I really appreciate his growth, and even yesterday I thought we saw some things. He's crashing hard into the far post, trying to get on the end of balls, wasn't able to do it. He's shown some growth as like a wide forward. That's not what he is.
Not it.
He's a midfielder. And so when you're talking about not winning enough second balls, even though they did yesterday, they haven't normally. You're talking about not having enough athleticism in the midfield. You're talking about not being able to have a little bit of creativity, not having enough energy and endurance in the midfield. You know who could help with that? Benjamin Kramaski. And instead, you're jettisoning him out to the wide areas. He's not a winger. And you know who's going to realize that? The next coach. So I don't know what this midfield is going to look like in a month. But for now, it's Kramaski being the guy you're expecting to score 2 goals for you. And that's never going to happen on a consistent basis.
Can I change the name of the ward so that it's nicer?
Maybe.
We can call him the Fallen Angel Ward because he was given wings, but he didn't know how to fly, and he fell down. And he's our golden boy. He's an angel. So, unfortunately, Benjamin Kramaski is just another one of those players who is suffering from being misprofiled, from being misused, and not being utilized properly. I completely agree with you. I had an award for him called the Invisible Man. Or actually, no, it wasn't called the Invisible Man. It was called the Martian Manhunter Award because Martian Manhunter can go invisible. And Benjamin Kramaski is trying to get involved. He's trying to be used in this system, but we just don't use him properly. We just don't make the most of him on the right-hand side. And in some games at the start of the season, we saw that, but also at the start of the season, we had a completely different play style to what we do now. And I think in this system, Kramaski as a right winger doesn't work. Put him in the midfield, he would be perfect to do that counter pressing in the middle yesterday. But unfortunately, we haven't seen him play one game in the middle this season. And again, as I said, case of misprofiling.
Well, and again, we've seen Toto Aviles be played out of position as a defensive midfielder because we haven't seemingly had any options outside of Redondo, Bright, and Busquets. And so if one of them's unavailable and you need to make a change, it has been Toto Aviles. When that shouldn't be the case. It should be Benjamin Kramaski, and Aviles should have been your starter at center back, but that's another conversation. Play the guys where they're supposed to be playing. I don't know if he thinks he's being cute, but Segovia is being played out of position. Kramaski is being played out of position. Gonzalo Lujan is being played when he shouldn't be. Redondo and Busquets and Bright have not been able to form a collective partnership together. You don't have a striker. You don't play wingers on a regular basis. And the 2 wingers you really have, if we're not going to consider Messi a winger, are just over-the-top pacey guys that aren't going to help you when you're sort of trying to break down a low block. So the team construction, which is entirely on Javier Mascherano because you had guys like Robert Taylor and Julian Gressel who can help you in different ways. It's concerning me on the wing. And when we get into this question about, Ash just asked what is the root cause of our lackluster form, and we'll get to some of the questions. We've been starring them as we've gone. I'm now becoming a little worried that at the wing spots we don't have the talent we need. And
yeah, the depth, the talent, the versatility, and it just feels like we're misprofiling all the players and putting. This is a conversation we had under Tata Martino as well, and I hate the fact that we're going to have the same conversation for Javier Mascherano, but he is putting those square pegs in round holes, and it's just not working.
Yeah, Toto Aviles being played out of position as a defensive midfielder, Ian Frey not being played enough. Tadeo Allende has been, I think, mispositioned on a regular basis. David Martinez is
right side. I think he's better on the left side.
So,
yeah,
it's just a lot of things he's getting cute at, and it's not coming off for him. Any other performances you want to talk about? First, let me say, Alan Obando didn't play yesterday. My theory is that he actually wasn't healthy. Fafo Picault was a late scratch from the lineup because he got a migraine. And I think Alan Obando was just put on the bench because someone had to fill the bench spot. But he was on the injury report. I imagine he wasn't actually healthy. So that's my theory of why he didn't play. I don't know if you feel differently.
No, and this is the list of the players that I wanted to talk about. I thought maybe about giving an award to Messi, but honestly, there's no new conversation to be had about Messi as such. He's just, again, suffering from the poor tactics and the lack of understanding of how we want to play in this system. Lujan, same exact conversation. I don't know where we go from here. Honestly, at this point, every time he's on the pitch, we have the same conversation about him. So what do you even say that's new? Ustari, I thought he's having average performances now. Again, symptomatic of how the whole team is performing. So it almost feels like it's across the board. Every single player is performing poorly. You can say today or Allende, I thought he should have started in that number 9 role instead of maybe Benjamin Kramaski. I think that's about it. We covered probably everyone that we wanted to cover, and it's becoming more and more obvious what the issues are, and at least that's a positive, right?
To us, it's becoming more obvious. I want to say Redondo started. I thought the three of them together was an interesting dynamic. Yeah. I thought it was fine. He comes off at halftime, but that wasn't because he was playing poorly, just because
it was because we were 2-0 down.
Toto Aviles, Ian Frey, Leo Alfonso come on in the second half, final 15 minutes. Game's out of hand. They tried, but I mean, nothing was going to happen at that point. Tadeo Allende, second half, didn't have a particularly spectacular game, but he did change the dynamics at least for a little bit. Kept things fresh. Okay, let's get to some of the questions because I think that will get to some of our talking points. Vice Rosa said, you heard Mascherano's excuse for the loss. He said, I don't think we were outplayed. Seriously, how stubborn are you? San Jose is going to enjoy pulverizing Lujan now. I'll just start by saying I don't think Lujan's going to start against San Jose. I think they rested Maxi Falcone so that he can start Wednesday and Saturday. That's my guess to why we didn't see him yesterday. And also, I think he will start instead of Lujan on Wednesday. Wouldn't shock me if Lujan starts at right back instead of Chelo, but yeah, let's talk about
Don't say it, man.
His overall thoughts on the game. He thought we didn't get outplayed.
That's the sign that the coach is losing it. When he comes out with absurd excuses, that's how you know, okay, he's trying to be defensive. He's trying to make excuses, and you can see clearly that's not the case. Everyone saw Minnesota outplayed us. Everyone saw it. They had a better game plan. They knew exactly what they wanted to do. And just because we had 70% possession doesn't mean we were the better team on the day. You have to realize that. Plans can be different. Teams play differently in the MLS, and they were better on the day. As simple as that.
I understand where he's coming from in the sense of Minnesota had a few moments and took advantage of them. But the fact that you have 73% possession does not mean you dominated the game. Inter Miami, they finished with half a goal of XG. They're not pouring in chances. They're not pouring in opportunities. They were dominating the ball, but that's because Minnesota was letting them do that, and they didn't actually know what they wanted to do with the ball. My 3 words at the beginning of this podcast were, can you intimidate, can you overwhelm, and can you suffocate? And they held the ball, but they didn't suffocate, they didn't overwhelm, and they certainly didn't intimidate a Minnesota United team. And speaking of intimidation, we haven't seen that a ton this year. A lot of the teams we've played have now seen the Messi circus. They're not quite so in awe of it. Not Minnesota. We've never played Minnesota with Messi. We've never gone to that stadium. If there was going to be a time for that sort of aura to come in and make the opposition nervous, to make the fans be on the edge of their seat the whole time, that was the right game for it. And just no intimidation factor whatsoever. That's how bad of a situation we're in right now in terms of where things are.
Dude, we're getting cooked by the Minnesota admin on Twitter. That's how bad we are.
Yeah. Tracy says, I'm just sad this is happening. I really believe that they have the talent to just play people in the right position. Just play people in the right position. I don't understand how Mosh doesn't see it. I still agree with this. I think on paper they have the most talented team in the MLS. I think they have incredibly exciting young players. I think they still have a lot of versatility. I'm a little bit more nervous about the wing positions than I was before they traded Robert Taylor and Julian Gressel. But aside from that, like I still think this is an incredibly talented roster. And I think we're just seeing poor culture, poor locker room, mismatched tactics, and poor personnel taking the field on a consistent basis. And that's why we look pretty poor.
I agree. We talked about how good the squad was, and I don't think my mind in that has changed. It's just they're not being used properly. As simple as that.
Sean says we don't have to be exceptional. We just have to be as good as last year. One of the
At
things,
this point, might as well.
well, and one of the things about last season is it wasn't good enough. We won the supporters shield. We broke the points record. We had
But that's
some
it.
incredible victories. We beat teams up 6-1, 6-2. Poured it on opponents, just crushed them. Had some incredible moments, and we looked like the best team in the MLS for 90% of the season. Obviously, we had a couple moments when we get beat up when we lost to Monterrey. Obviously, the Atlanta series in the playoffs didn't go the way we wanted it to, but for the majority of the season, Inter Miami looked like the best team in the league. 90% of the season. They still had the intimidation factor. There was still Miami is coming to town. That's a big game. The biggest games of the week were Inter Miami against whoever. We got Taylor Twellman every single game because he does their big games. I haven't heard Taylor Twellman in a while.
That's true. One positive.
So I guess the point is like this spectacular nature of Inter Miami that they even had, I thought, for most of last year is gone. And that wasn't good enough. 90% of the time wasn't good enough. They were aiming to be 100% the best team in the league 100% of the time. And the fact that they're here and people are making excuses and people are going to justify this decision or that decision, it's rotting as we speak. There's a bad apple that's poisoning all the rest, whatever it is, whatever euphemism you want to use. It's getting worse. I don't see how this coach is going to fix it. And so you have to decide, are we just going to lower our expectations, or are we going to cut out the apple, cut out the rot, whatever, throw away the mold and restart? And I think that has to happen with the new coach. I thought the Vancouver game was a wake-up call, or should have been a wake-up call. And I don't think what we've seen over the last two games has shown me that this team has woken up, which is what I saw last year. When they lost to Monterrey, they did look like they got a wake-up call.
We went on a 10-game not losing streak. Like, it was fantastic.
So
we're just average right now, and that's where we're at. Honestly, at this point, if we can get back to as good as we were last season, I would just be happy.
The first 5 games of the season, 13 points, 4 wins and 1 draw. The last 6 games, so now more than half of the MLS season, 6 games, 8 points. So we started with 13 from 5. Now we've got 8 points from 6, which is absolutely average over the last 8 games in the MLS. And that doesn't include getting blanked by LAFC, and it doesn't include a couple beatdowns from Vancouver. We have lost 5 of our last 10 games. We've only won 3 of our last 10 games. This is actually an average team right now that I think has the talent to pull itself up into good status, but I don't think they have the coaching staff and the all-in buy-in of the roster to pull themselves into phenomenal status. I think you need a new coach if you want to go that direction. I'll probably take this one. USMNT Total Football says, what do you guys think about signing Gio Reyna? This is not the right place for Gio Reyna. I like Gio Reyna as a talent. He could come to the MLS. If he does come to the MLS, he needs to go to a place where he's going to be the superstar of the team. That's not going to happen in Miami. Do I think he would be an improvement on Telasco Segovia? Yeah, I do. But that's not what he needs for his career, so I don't think this is going to happen. Zaburko says, it appears that pretty much none of the new transfers from this season have turned out to be good signings. I'll let you start with that one.
No, I disagree with this because I think at the start of the season for the first 5 games, we were lauding on how every single transfer that we made is doing really well. Maxi Falcone has, I think, been a phenomenal signing. Telasco Segovia, Tadeo Allende were doing really well up until we broke them. And at this point, I think we don't individualize every player. This is about how we're playing as a team, because The starting 11 is not performing. All 11 players on the pitch are not performing. And it's not just about the individual player. So I still think our transfer window is fantastic. We did an entire conversation about this. So I would urge you to go listen to that. And that was after Inter Miami's performances dipped. So for me, I think the transfer window went exactly how we wanted it to be. The talents are all there. It's just symptomatic of how poor we've been as a team, that none of the others are performing either.
I'm a little bit less positive about the window than I was as it was happening.
More so the talents that we brought in rather than the number of players and the number of like positions and stuff and who we let go.
Right. Specifically, though, for me, is the style of players we brought in. I think they're all talented, other than Lujan, who I've been very vocal about. But the fact that the style of center backs they brought in wasn't particularly pacey made me, like now in retrospect, that's making me nervous. The fact that all we brought in from the winger perspective were pacey runners over the top, that makes me nervous. Those are two things that indicate you're going to be a sit in a low block and counterattack team. So while I think Fafa Picault and Tadeu Allende are good players, and Maxi Falcone too, I actually don't love the style of players they are and what that means for Javier Mascherano's sort of thinking about what this team should be. But I do think Alan Obando is a really nice player. I think Maxi Falcone is a good player. I'm excited to see what Baltasar is. So it's not that I think they're bad players, but I am a little nervous about what they mean for this style of play that Javier Mascherano wants to play. David says they better get their stuff together before the Club World Cup. Can I just say that until they fire Javier Mascherano, you should have the expectations of 0 wins in the Club World Cup. This team right now is not going to even get a draw in the Club World Cup.
No. We're going to get decimated.
And I do think the only thing that's going to change that is a new coach that can sort of regalvanize and get guys on the same sort of wavelength. And then beyond that, get them to play a style of soccer that suits them. Because I don't think that's what's happening right now. So just lower the expectations now. Vice Rosa says Miami needs to get rid of a few players. We went from a bad year with Tata no MLS Cup to now being predictable with Mascherano. I think Gonzalo Lujan has to leave the team at the end of this season.
Lujan's going to be the longest serving player on this Inter Miami team. He's going to be here forever. Trust me.
I think that they're going to pull in Emerson Rodriguez and they're just going to loan him out to a bunch of places. And I think that's what you have to do because no one's going to buy him on the contract he's on. And that's going to be a noose around your neck for a long time. That's the worst signing they've made in years. And it's only May 11th and we already see that. It's just really tough. Ash says, what is the root cause of our lackluster form that can be resolved quickly?
I think the first step that needs to happen, and this can be a whole podcast in itself, and I don't want to go into that because we've already talked for an hour and 20, but the first thing that needs to happen is just play the right players. Put your best players on the pitch to get that result. If you don't do that, everything else is downhill from there. Ian Frey needs to start. Bright needs to start. Delasco Segovia needs to be played in a certain position. You have to put your players where they need to be played rather than where you want them to play. And that's how you build a foundation on this team.
I'm going to go in a different direction. The 3 words I keep coming back to are intimidate, suffocate, overwhelm. That's what a Lionel Messi team should be doing. And that means you have to play high up the field, trying to score 5-6 goals every game because it's in you. You have the best players. Try and do that. And if you start there, you're going to naturally pick different personnel that are going to fit a system that's going to do that. Right now, we're trying to win games 2-1, and it's sort of a loser's mentality, I think. So try to intimidate other teams, try and suffocate them, try and overwhelm them. And by trying to do those things, you're going to find the right personnel that fit that type of system, and you're going to get Ian Freys, you're going to get Toto Avilases, you're going to get all the things you just mentioned. So what you're saying is part of it, but it's sort of like the idea of how you want to play soccer that I think needs to change. And Javier Mascherano, that's like just not what he's about. So that's why I think you have to change the coach. Miami King says, we can't change the coach, but we have to change the tactics. The issue is Mascherano keeps doing stupid things. I think they can change the coach.
I agree. They 100% can. I think we're at that stage where we need to consider that option and already think about alternatives.
Yeah. Ash says the law of averages says this lack of form can't
Trust me,
continue.
mate. I've been a fan of Manchester United half my life, and I can tell you for a fact the lack of form can continue for a long time. It's been 84 years.
Just want to get through the last couple ones. Sammy says Hercules Gomez says that the old players are messing with the balance of the team. For every Suarez, Messi, Alba, etc., there has to be a young player that covers for their lack of energy on defense. What do you think about that?
I kind of disagree. I think there's a certain balance. Of course, you're not going to be the most well-rounded team when you have your number one player at least 37 years old. But I don't think this team lacks that. I think this team lacks a coherent structure. There's too many different things happening on the pitch. The forwards are trying to play like a proper offense, and then you basically tie their hands and say, no, you have to play a defensive game. And that's where I think our incongruency is starting. Yesterday's game was exactly about that. You let your forwards do the thing, whether you arm them with two defenders who are fairly slow and not great on counterattack, and that's how your team gets completely broken down. I don't think it's about old players messing the balance of the team. It's about actually surrounding them with the right tools. And we have those tools already. We have the young players that can cover the ground, that have the energy to do the defensive work. Yannick Bright is more than capable of doing that. Benjamin Kramaski, more than capable of doing that. Ian Frey, Noah Allen, as we've seen, is much quicker, is able to cover up for the counterattack. So the tools are there. You just have to put them in place, but we're not using that.
Yeah, I want to give him a little bit of credit because what he's trying to do, which is be an expert on every team in the MLS and every team in Mexico as well, it's an impossible job. And so I appreciate how hard that is. But this is just a lazy take of saying they have too many old players, they can't run around enough. That's not the problem going on with Inter Miami. And if you are watching every game like Inter Miami fans do, you start to see that the problems are much deeper. This team has won plenty of games. They have dominated plenty of games. They have beaten really good teams with these same four players playing. It is not a matter of if they are talented enough or athletic enough. It's about can the coach put them in a position that maximizes their talent and then covers up their weaknesses with everyone else that's around. And we've seen it happen plenty of times over the last 2 years. So I appreciate Herc. I like Herc, but that's what a national analyst would type of thing to say. Okay, Saur, before we get out of here, and I'm amazed we made it to almost 90 minutes, what do you want to see on Wednesday against San Jose?
Just get me a win, man. Honestly, just get me a win. If you want me to go deeper than that, then
What does a win get you? What does a win even do at this point?
Honestly, nothing.
Because they're going to make the playoffs.
I don't know what can improve because I don't think the play style is going to improve. I don't think, the structure is going to improve. The team selection is probably not going to improve. I want to see something exciting like I saw yesterday in the team selection, and then we'll see where it goes from there. Give me Ian Frey, and at least that'll be one step ahead in the right direction.
Yeah, I think we're at a point right now where the results actually don't matter because they're going to make the playoffs, and if they have it figured out by the time the playoffs come around, then they have the talent to go on a run. But you want to see them take steps towards being a great team, and I think that starts with having a more aggressive mindset. And so for me, I want to see the fullbacks play higher up the field. That's what I want to see on Wednesday. I don't feel confident it's going to happen. I think we're going to get Maxi Falcone instead of Lujan. I think we might get Frey instead of Chelo, but only because he doesn't want Chelo to play 3 games in 8 days, I guess, with the Orlando City game coming up next weekend. But I could also see it being Lujan, so I don't want to get too deep into that. I think we'll get Noah Allen at left center back, Jordi Alba, probably Redondo and Busquets in the midfield because Redondo only played 45. Messi, maybe we'll get Obando, maybe we'll get Baltasar. That would be fun, right? And we'll have something.
He doesn't exist, mate. He's a specter of our imagination.
Okay, final words, Saur, before we wrap it up.
This is where we are. This is where we are at as a team. I think for the next foreseeable future, you're going to have to sit through a lot of us rambling on about why Javier Mascherano is not the right coach for this team. So I apologize if it gets repetitive. I apologize if it sounds too dire and it sounds too negative, but unfortunately, Inter Miami is in a bad position right now. And we'll see. Have to take it game by game and understand where this team can go. Hopefully things improve soon. Law of averages? Maybe. That's all I
No,
have to say.
I actually think that's a great point because I want to come on and be positive, and I want to be tweeting awesome things about how great this team is and all these little aspects of things that are building to some great picture. Like, I want to do that. I think I'm a naturally optimistic person, but we're just fans coming on here and trying to tell what we think is the truth. And so it's hard to be ultra positive right now. And I think that's where we're at. I will just leave my final thoughts. Is how I started this podcast. This is a team that has to decide, are they okay being a good MLS team, or do they want to be a generational type MLS team? And if that's what your goal is, you need to change things in a dramatic way, because we're heading down and it's getting worse week after week, week after week, week after week. Guys, we'll be back for the pregame show. It's a late game Wednesday night, so be prepared for that. We always do the pregame show live on YouTube. Please join us 1 hour before kickoff. We'll talk about San Jose. Hopefully we'll be talking about Baltasar Rodriguez, because that would be a lot of fun. I think they have a great chance to win on Wednesday. San Jose is fine. They're not a spectacular team, but it's a road game in the MLS, and those are always hard. So hopefully they can pull through and get 3 points. And we start to see some positive momentum and a change in what the coach is trying to do that we think can lead to better results. Other than that, we will see you, and I hope you guys enjoy the next few days. Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in. Do us a favor and hit that like and subscribe button. Since our first viewer, sharing this with you all has been the very best part. So from the beginning until the end, thank you for being a part of this, and have a wonderful day.